I kept sitting here wondering why I couldn't hear you. I had my stinking volume on mute. Like, why isn't she listening to me? By the way, happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody.
Yes. My kid's devastated because she has St. Patty's Day leggings and school got canceled. Because our fog is really bad still, I guess. So they just canceled school.
That's a bummer. Our
Yeah.
fog's really bad too.
Oh, this is what I mean. Everything's just been incredibly slow, and maybe the computer's in a fog. I don't know. Okay, so you guys kind of talk to me about what you understand, what you don't understand. So what's the difference between congenital and acquired? Because that's something you got to know, the difference between congenital and acquired reasons.
Congenital is when you are born with the defect,
Yes.
and acquired is something that happens like through surgery or an accident.
Yes, so it's exactly how it sounds. Congenital, you're born with it. And there are some really awesome videos out there with kids and them getting prosthetics, and explaining reasons why sometimes they don't. And then the acquired, the stuff that you get just through things that happen later in life. Which one do you think is easier to deal with?
Congenital,
Why?
because you don't know anything different.
Exactly. You don't know what it's like to not have the arm or the leg or both arms. You just do whatever you need to do the way, and that is kind of the reason behind why some parents choose not to get their child prosthetics, because they want them to be, they just learn to do things on their own. But the one thing that, and I'm so sad that you guys don't get to meet Dan. He just cracks me up all the time. But one thing he's kind of talked about, because he's on the end of making them, delivering that, adjusting and doing all that kind of stuff. He said one thing that parents don't always think about is, what if the child changes their mind later and would like one? It's really hard to later adjust to one versus if you get them fitted with one right away and get them used to using it, so then they can have a choice. But as a parent myself, I don't know. And as an OT, I don't know that I'd want them to just adapt to who they are. And really, they're not even adapting. They just, figure things out, and it is the way it is. So, but there are sometimes, when you kind of are forced, like there's even some videos on where they'll do the helmets for the kids. So that is part of a prosthetist's job as well. So this is usually the other time too, after we start talking about this, everybody's like, I want to go specialize in prosthetics. It sounds like it's really fun. So, and everything might really intrigue you, and, it might spur on some specialty that you might want to jump right on into. Star this too. I'm pretty sure I probably said it in the lecture, but you're going to need to be able to identify the common upper extremity versus the common lower extremity. As you look at the differences, what's something that you notice is bigger related on the upper extremity than the lower extremity? And these are ranked in order, like the top reasons. So what do you notice more about the upper extremity ones than the lower extremity ones?
Upper
lower
extremities are
more of
caused by.
Oh, go ahead, Tori.
Oh, sorry.
No, you
Lower-
were almost simultaneously saying the exact same thing, I think. So it's like stereo over here.
The lower extremities are caused by like a secondary condition,
Yes.
like PVD.
Yeah, and you've got the diabetes. Yes, so from smoking, diabetes, it's something, you know, health related usually. Versus the upper extremity are those accident type things. A lot of work, you know, which in your head should make sense, would make sense. Not that lower extremities don't have accidental things. Because the amputee OT that I'm going to have you watch, it was a lower extremity accident type thing that happened. It wasn't any health related condition. And it always cracks me up because, you know, the gunshot wounds is people shooting themselves in the foot, literally. I mean, that's what happens. You know, they end up shooting themselves or something when they're cleaning a gun or something, and they end up needing some sort of amputation done. This does include even on like the lower extremity side. Sometimes it's just toes or parts of the foot. It's not always a large amputation. And I made sure on your OT amputation list, I added the one where she talks about why she chose what she did, because she actually got a choice to decide what type of amputation she wanted or how much. So she really talks about why she chose what she did and why what she chose was going to end up being a little bit more functional in the end. So I think you find more value out of listening to somebody that actually had it happen to them than listen to me try to say it all. So I just want to make sure everybody's got all the technical stuff. So the primary goal of the surgery is that you want to leave as much as possible so they have as much function, but you also have to make sure you've taken enough that there won't be issues down the road. So sometimes, and it kind of, where is it? I think it might be a couple slides down. I'm going to skip the slide, jump to slide 12, kind of back and forth, so it kind of makes a little bit of sense. So this is you need to know these words too. So this trumps up everybody. Please make sure you read the questions on the final and read through the exact answers as well before you jump into assuming what it wants. So for a long transradial, and so who remembers actually from the lecture, what's the difference between the long and the short? How do you know what that means?
The long is whenever you have like more of, like you have more left, I guess, how you want to word it. And then the
Yes.
short is you have less left.
Yes. So it's not how much they cut off. You know, they didn't cut off a long amount or a short amount. It's how much is left. So if they did a long transradial, it's kind of, it's in they've kind of got most of the wrist the wrist and most of the hand, and then part of the radius is cut. So they've got some forearm. So you can see the benefit of doing, if there's a choice, a long one over a short one, because the long will give you more. So you're going to have all of the shoulder. You're going to have all the elbow flexion, extension, and some pronation and supination. Why would you have some pronation and supination? But with the short transradial, you'd lose it all.
Have nothing to supinate or pronate.
Well, but with both, you're losing the hand,
Okay.
because the long
Well, you can still-
transradial. No, go
Can't
ahead.
you pronate and supinate your lower forearm? I mean, if you have a long one.
Yes, yes, that's why they're, because where are the pronator, where do they insert and originate? They go through the full entire forearm, correct?
Yeah.
So if they just cut, like imagine they cut a few inches above or below the wrist. Okay. So you still have the majority of the muscle belly there for pronation and supination. Why that's helpful is so they have that muscle belly strength to use their own muscle to pronate and supinate the prosthetic hand. Otherwise, the prosthetic's going to have to be able to do it all. So the more they can leave there and you can use of your own muscle willpower, the better off it is. Is that making sense? How you could use your own muscle power to then turn the prosthetic? I think I'm getting several blank looks, at least for who I'm looking at the moment. Does that make sense? Or is it like, I have no idea what she was just talking about? Okay, what do you think? Does it kind of make sense? Half, half, okay. So how much is half for you?
I think I'm getting it. It's gonna take a little bit more going over.
Yeah, and that's why, and I hope the videos, because it'll show, okay, this is what it looks like, you know, because just trying to kind of imagine in your head is kind of hard. So especially since we're all such visual active learners. But this is where it comes into play, understanding all, you know, where the muscles originate and insert, because the more of it that you have on your own, the more beneficial. Because as soon as they have to start cutting more towards the elbow, so we've got this short transradial, now we've lost all of this pronation and supination. And you can use, and this is where it might blow your mind a little bit, you can use force to do elbow flexion. Because think, all elbow flexion extension, you know, is bicep, triceps, so those muscles are still there. So what the patient can do is by contracting those, it will force the prosthetic to flex. That is always the hardest part for anybody wanting to get a prosthetic. And sometimes why people choose to not get one. It's incredibly hard and a long process to learn to use one. Because oftentimes you're retraining muscles to do things they weren't intended to do. So you're, especially those who end up with higher level humeral, because there'll be a long humeral and a short humeral as well. So if we're losing most of our humerus and we're left with just like the shoulder socket, a lot of your smaller accessory muscles now have to be trained to help provide the strength to operate the prosthetic. I think because what happens, I go down a couple more slides, you see there's the harness. So in order to strap on this full arm prosthetic, the patient's going to wear a harness to put it on. To operate this harness, what makes it move is by retracting and protracting your scaps. I know, it's like blowing your mind, right? Like how does it? But what that does is when you're, and I can't remember which one I like, but well, it ends up, they figure out which way is stronger for the patient. But if you retract, that will pull the cables that are attached to the harness and then make the elbow flex or extend. Like whichever way is stronger for the patient. If retracting is stronger for them, that might be the elbow flexion. So then when they protract, it would relax it. And it's all about how all the harness and cables are attached. So if you've got an engineering kind of mind and this just, wow, this is awesome and cool, and I really like how all this works, you might be a good prosthetist person. I've just always thought it's just, it does blow my mind how you can educate the body to do things. There are then some that the protraction will open up a hand versus the retraction will close the hand. It just depends what is already stronger for the patient and what you can help retrain them. So if you can imagine, those protractor and retractor are not big and strong. They're not meant to normally operate an entire arm. So it takes a lot to be able to get them strong enough to do this. Guess who helps them do all that work? That would be us. The prosthetist will help fit them for the device. They will come if there's issues with, the prosthetic itself, if there's any red areas, any adjustments need made, that kind of stuff, that's them. We, on the other hand, have got to help teach them, how do we put this darn thing on? How do we take it off? How do we use it in all our ADLs? What muscles do we have to now get stronger in order to make things work the way they need to? Sometimes from what I've learned in watching videos on my own, and when Dan has brought in his prosthetics, upper extremity ones are more complicated and intense. Why is that? It should make sense why it would be.
Because you do more work with them. Your upper body does more work.
Yes, we use our upper body for so much. Any little bit that's gone, there's a lot more training involved. Even if you're just losing a hand, we do a lot with our hands. So they have to be more involved. They need to be, allow for so much more function. than a lower extremity one would. Now, that doesn't mean obviously they're any, you know, I don't want to say less complicated, but they're putting on and off a below knee or above the knee prosthetic is so much easier than getting somebody to put this harness on, especially the first, you know, month or so when they're trying to get the hang of this. And I'm hoping I can re-find that one video of the guy showing, because it blows you, you're like, oh my gosh, how in the world did he just do that? But it takes time. And it takes the patient's buy-in. They have to be willing to put in the hard work that it's going to take to learn how to use the prosthetic. Some patients don't want to take the time to do it. They'll just like, I'll deal with it without it. I'll do everything one-handed, or I'll just use crutches or whatever and get around, you know, without the leg. I'll just live without. That's okay. That's their right if that's what they want to do. But it's easier to, if, you know, if 2 years down the line they decide and change their mind, it's going to be a little harder to get everything to fit and work correctly, because now they've got 2 years worth of atrophy to an area that we could have been strengthening the whole time and making using a prosthetic easier. So I know I'm jumping between slides, but it kind of all links together. And you heard me just ramble on slide by slide in the lecture, so. So I wanted to make sure you kind of starting to make some links about like what things kind of look like. Not only are we in charge, responsible for, you know, using the prosthetic, getting it to, you know, getting them to don and doff it, getting them to do ADLs, whether they choose to use the prosthetic or not, they still have to be able to do their ADLs, IADLs. There's the whole psychological consequence of losing a limb. It is in our domain. Please do not ever forget, mental health is where we started. Mental health is our domain. We are fully capable of managing all of the psychological consequences. You yourself might not feel comfortable, but it's in our domain. So if it's something that interests you, please get, you know, we do an entire class, you get an entire class this summer, and then additional stuff in the fall. So we really do hit mental health really hard, because even if you don't want to work with mental health patients, you're going to end up working with somebody's mental health at some point. If you're working at the hospital, you might be working with amputees. You're going to be working with people who've just had a recent stroke and all of a sudden they can't go back to work. You know, they come in from a car accident and, you know, things are, you know, either were amputated or are so broken, they're, you know, maybe there's a spinal cord injury. Whenever there's a major life event, there's all the psychological consequences to it. We have to be able to help our patients go through that. The going through the grieving process of losing a limb might seem kind of strange, but think of it, it's a loss. They've lost something, so they have to go through the whole process. It's the same, for example, you know, we're going to talk about some spinal cord injury stuff. It's still a loss. They've lost their ability to do what they were doing a week before the injury.
Mrs. Hanous,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Shauna just sent me a text and said she lost power, so she has no internet.
Yeah, that's, yeah, I
Okay.
was kind of back and forth. So luckily,
Okay.
this is a good record day, so I'm telling you.
I'm back now. Thank you.
Oh, hi, sorry. I just saw
No.
my phone.
It's okay. I called both of you and I'm like, help me.
Oh,
I'm
yeah, now I see
trying
it.
to throw my hands up with technology this week because I'm just,
Well, and
hopefully we all make it work.
I just
Welcome to my world.
typically in our town, if we lose electricity once, it goes multiple times. So if I disappear, that's what it is. So I'm glad we're recording.
Yes, we're recording.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
So keep in mind, we've got to help our patient go through the denial, anger, depression, coping, acceptance. No matter what it was, they're going to go through all those stages. They're going to go back and forth. You may think, okay, great, we're starting to cope and we're managing and they're accepting this, and something all of a sudden will happen and they'll slide back down somewhere else again. You know, maybe you've been seeing them in the clinic and they're doing really great with their prosthetic, and all of a sudden an annual event that they always participated in suddenly came up that they now can't go participate in. And they slide back down to the anger and depression because this is something they did every year and now they can't. You know, or at least they can't do it the way they did before. So this is a sliding scale, and it's not, and I really, really want you to understand that it's not just for people who've lost someone to death. It's, you've lost anything. You know, even if you lose your house in a fire, it is a loss. You're gonna, you know, you might not be able to deny that your house is gone, but you're going to go to anger and depression and through some of those things. So just keep that in mind, that it's a sliding scale and we all go through it whenever there's some sort of loss. They've also got to accept this new body image. They look different. Younger people have a harder time with that, just because they know they have their entire life ahead of them and now they're going to look different. And then it also gives them a, you know, maybe they, you know, think of, you know, any of you in your early 20s, you're in this program, you know, this is what you want to do. All of a sudden you have a major life incident that means you can no longer do what you planned you were going to do with your life. Now what happens? So it is a huge thing that we have to help our patients through. And sometimes, you know, and it's, you'll probably get tired of hearing me kind of talk about this whole, because, you know, we're going to do burns and spinal cord and all that kinds of stuff in the next few weeks. It's all the same for all of those kinds of people. It's such a huge part of what we do. You can't skip over it. If you have to take a 30-minute treatment session to help somebody get through this, you're going to have much better luck in the next following days with therapy than if you just kind of pushed them and said, oh, get over it, and didn't respond and acknowledge the psychological components.
Not to be cheesy, but this is a really good life lesson. I mean, not just for being in the clinic, but everyday life too.
Yeah, and it is one of those things that, do you guys remember, did we showed you at the diversity thing, the video from the Cleveland Clinic? You like, you don't know what people are going through every day. Remember that little clip? Yes, no, you may remember, kind of.
Yeah,
Sort of.
I do.
Okay. Thanks for volunteering. It, you know, that's all part of it. You know, we don't know what loss anybody's going through at the moment. So just, we have to be able to help them get through it. That is a huge part of what we do. Even if you're not a huge fan of mental health, you know, in the next couple semesters, we're going to help you. Well, what do I do when somebody is so depressed they won't get out of bed? You know, what do I do when they're mad, yelling and screaming at me because they're so mad at the world? You know, we're going to be going through some of that to help give you some more of those skills. So then the next, you know, we're there to help them adjust whatever way that they decide, whether we're helping them adjust to the prosthetic or we're helping them adjust to life without the prosthetic and just the amputation. And it starts right after surgery. So those of you who might like to work in the hospital, it's going to start right away, because this is the interesting thing that happens to the body. Whenever, and it's kind of think about when we've talked about hot and cold and how our body responds to injury. So the easiest example that I think everybody can imagine in their head, if we do a below knee amputation. So you've got the whole knee and they cut off just below it. Okay, everybody got that image in their head? So all of a sudden the body knows there's a big major incident that happened down there at the knee. So what do you think happens? What's your body's response to injury?
Pain.
Pain and
Inflammation.
inflammation. Remember, I got to heal this area. Something's wrong. So I'm going to send all of my fighter cells down there to that area. And that causes the inflammation and the swelling. Now imagine that it kind of just stops. There's no, you know, when you've got your full extremity, there's the whole blood flow process, you know, so the blood would flow down to your toes and, you know, then it goes back up through the veins and everything kind of circulates. So we can help circulate some of the fluid. Well, guess what? If you've cut off the end of my circulation train, it just pools at the end of the amputation. So you get all of this swelling at the end of what we call residual limb. So whatever's left is the residual limb. And it just swells. Usually for the first 6 months to a year, that swelling comes and goes. The body will adjust for a while and you have it contained, and then it will start swelling up again. So inflammation is a huge thing that we have to help our patients manage. Do we know how to manage edema? Yeah, you should have all your strategies for managing edema. One of the big things for residual limbs to control that swelling is the compression sleeves. So there were a couple pictures of those. Let me find them. Slide 14 will have your their shrinker socks. What else are they called? It could just be a compression sleeve. So if any of you have ever seen, how many of you, I know Rhonda, you probably have seen TED hose, somebody that they wear the white compression hose like after surgery. That's this exact same material. Okay, so they're going to slide it over the end to help keep the edema under control. And they don't want to, I don't want to rephrase that. There might be a point where the patient might have to wear multiple of these. That would be because we want to try and start fitting them to some sort of prosthetic as soon as possible. Well, since that edema ebbs and flows for a while, they might need multiple of these socks. Because when we fit the prosthetic, when the prosthetist comes in and takes a mold, if there's a lot of swelling there, when they come back with the prosthetic in a couple weeks and the patient's now lost some of that edema, the prosthetic's not going to have a firm seal. It's not going to fit smooth because the residual limb shrank. So what they do is add more socks to fill up that gap. So it's teaching the patient to be able to gauge, well, if it's feeling loose today, you might have to put on another 1 or 2 socks in order to make that gap. Because if it doesn't have a firm seal and lock, they're going to get a lot of skin irritation. Think it's just rubbing on the prosthetic, is just rubbing on the skin and not having a good seal. So that's usually some of the problem things that happen. You know, they'll end up with red areas, and then it's figuring out, just like with the splints. Okay, well, did we have some pressure areas that we didn't notice about? Are we having a lot of fluctuation in edema that maybe we need to not wear the prosthetic for a while and get the edema under control and then go back to the prosthetic? So those are all kinds of questions you're gonna, you have to help educate your patient that this isn't gonna be you slap it on in the morning and you're ready to go every day. At some point they'll get there. But that first year is rough because the body's starting to adjust to this limb not being there anymore. And what do I do with, all of the circuitry that I used to use down? The brain is like, well, I'm used to sending all of my information all the way down to the foot, but it's not there anymore. What do I do? It's got to retrain. The other thing about the socks is it helps form the nice rounded end of the residual limb. You want that rounded, contoured end so it will fit nicely into the socket. Because do I have a good picture of what it looks like when I first cut? I don't think I do. I don't have a great picture. But I know the amputee OT does. She's got, like, right after surgery, she'll show you what it looks like. And again, it'll be where you just want to start clicking through her videos because she's just tells you so much. The first few, because there's the first one I'm going to give you to watch of hers is at the very beginning when all this happened. She kind of tells you what happened, and she hasn't even had the amputation yet because she's dealing with the wound. She does a whole other one on what the wound looks like and everything. If you got a weak stomach, you might not want to watch that one because she shows all the dead necrotic tissue and everything. If you don't mind that, go ahead and take a look at it because it's very interesting. But she shows, like, post-op right away. It's not this nice round, imagine the doc just goes in and basically cuts it off and sutures it up. So it's not this rounded, nice shaped contour thing right away. The stockinettes and our wrappings help form that. It doesn't just happen. So that's the other reason for all these compression garments and socks. So it's for compression and edema management. And it's to help form the contoured end of the residual limb. I know for a fact there's a question of some sort like that on the exam. Like, it's one of those, which of the following do these things not do? So I want to make sure that that makes sense of what all of that does. Everybody kind of with? Anybody got questions or intriguing thoughts so far? I know I've jumped actual PowerPoint slides, but kind of trying to help link it all together.
I was gonna say, you can really tell in the patients that have started, someone has started at the beginning with them and they've let them work with their stump and that, and the people who haven't, there's such a huge difference in the way the end looks. I mean, as far as either, you know, like this picture here, more rounded and kind of tapered versus like just almost like flat and thick. It's kind of,
Yeah, if it's been
But-
taken care of, yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes what happens is it's sometimes no fault of the patients themselves. They develop post-op complications. You know, the one thing you talk about, you know, they develop some neuromas or they develop wounds on here. And it's just, you know, if you've already got a wound, to try to do all this compression, you got to let the wound heal first before you can start managing the edema. I always found it, and it's probably because they were two of my favorite patients, but it's also because they were my two main prosthetic patients. And I had them at the same time, God love them. I was at the nursing home and the one guy had he had gone in, he was losing part of the leg from diabetic neuropathy, ended up having a stroke after the surgery. So he was extremely confused and not understanding what was going on. I mean, you know, imagine going into surgery, he knew he was going to lose the leg. You know, this was a planned procedure. And then he had the stroke. So he was really confused about what was going on. And we couldn't get him up and moving as well as we would have had the stroke not occurred. So we had this post-op complication that just led to further, we never did get him into a prosthetic whatsoever because we were doing wound management and just edema management. He was incredibly hypersensitive in that area. So you can imagine if you're hypersensitive, trying to put these tight stockinettes on, probably it was throwing him through the roof. He hated them. You know, it just hurt. But we had the added complication of, you know, the cognitive deficit from the stroke. So he didn't always understand what was going on. So like I said, we never did get him into a prosthetic. But the other gentleman we had at the time, we did get him into one. I believe he was very similar in that it was a neuropathy DVT kind of reason why he needed to lose part of the leg. But while we were waiting to get everything fit for him, he got so comfortable just transferring, you know, being able to transfer from wheelchair and bed without the limb, that once it came, he just never really fully embraced it. So, you know, he got, you know, God love insurance, spent all this money on a prosthetic. You know, we did get him up in it for a while, but then he was just like, you know what, it's just so much easier without it. And I think for him, he wasn't ever going to go home. He was going to end up staying at the nursing home. So for him, he was like, what's the point of bothering with the prosthetic if I'm just going to go from bed to wheelchair? And he would just zip around and he was fine. So it was, I don't have the greatest success stories with them, honestly, because but it's just kind of, it shows you it depends. You know, you can't always, you know, you can't just throw a prosthetic on somebody and expect it to work. And just because of the population I worked with too, we always had added, you know, medical issues that would come up that would limit putting them on right away. So yeah, sorry, not the greatest examples, but That's why I'm going to show you videos of people who are using them.
Professor Anus, you
Yes.
said that the information that we need for our exam is that the socks help to form that rounded end for the better fit of the prosthetic, correct?
Yes. And
Is
they
that
do
it?
what's the other thing? The other big thing they do?
Like they fill in the gap?
Yeah, but they're a compression garment. So what do they do other than
Oh,
form the limb?
edema.
Yeah, they're doing the edema. Just making sure anything else. In this big section. Okay, so I'll go to all the fun pictures. So this is what you will see at the end of the residual limb. A lot of times, this is the socket. So the socket would go on first. So this would get attached at the end of this. It'll slide on. Imagine this, that whether this was an elbow or a knee. It's obviously a knee, but either way, it works the same. And then the prosthetic itself hooks into the end of the sock, the hook right here. They'll attach together. The reason they're not all one piece is especially upper extremity, so you can attach different devices depending on what your need is for that day. So for this particular picture with the socket, they're probably going to be attaching the entire arm. And this little hinge joint where the elbow is, this is what it looks like. So when I said when they've got that short transradial, they'll have force to be able to bend the elbow. Imagine right here is where they'll still have their biceps, and they'll be able to use that force and momentum to swing the end of the prosthetic into flexion. And once it's there, it'll lock. Like they'll swing it. Oh, sorry. So they'll use the power of their biceps to kind of make a swinging motion and momentum and get it to come up. And then it'll lock until they do kind of the reverse to unlock it. And I find it wild to watch people who are, like several years later, and how smooth they make it look. They just make it look like they never lost a limb. That it's just, but it takes ultimate commitment from them to do it, because it is so much work. So this will also be, imagine if we've got a long transradial and we've just lost wrist and hand. Then these are the kinds of things they would attach at the end of that. Anybody know I'm going to tell you the most common end to whether it is a whole arm amputation or if they've just lost the hand, the most common end thing to put on it to make it extremely functional is a hook. Imagine like Captain Hook. It is a hook at the end. Anybody know why? And I might have said it in the lecture, so you can sound really smart if you remember. Why would a hook make things incredibly easier and more functional than putting on this prosthetic hand itself?
Maybe less for them to deal with.
Okay.
I'm guessing. I don't remember what
And I might not have
It
said
allows
no.
for, it's almost as if your hand is like in a hook. You're able to start holding things, picking things up when it's already kind of in that not that functional position, if you will. Like your hand, if it's already in a hook, you're able to start performing ADLs. Rather, if it was just like the end that looks like a hand where it has absolutely no functional use to it, it's just there.
Yes, these oftentimes don't have much functional use to them. They're for cosmetic reasons most of the time. The other big reason, remember that crazy word that everybody really struggles with, proprioception?
Mhm.
Well, imagine what happens is even if this hand, you know, the one that's here beside the hook, even if it did open and close its fingers, you won't be able to feel if you have a hold of anything. So you could, you know, everybody try to grab their water bottle right now. Right now, you could close your eyes and still know you had a hold of it because all of your sensory and proprioception are intact to be able to tell you, I've got a hold of something. This is what it feels like. It must be my water bottle. Well, this hand has none of that in it. Imagine it's just a big piece of fancy plastic at this point. So you won't be able to feel that you have a hold of anything. So if you have a hook, you can see what you have a hold of all of the way. Does that make sense? You can fully see how much you have a hold of it, and you don't have to worry about being able to feel it.
Yeah, like if you had this in your hand, you couldn't see what was on the other side of the hand. Is that what you mean? Like,
Yes, you can't
so
see
you
what's on the
basically-
other side either.
Okay.
I might, you know, there might be something else on the other side that I might have hit if I used my hand. You know, if I'm actually picking it up, I get to the other side of it and I can feel, but you can't feel with the hand. So the hook just makes it way more functional because you can see through it and be able to use your vision the whole time to be able to see what you're getting, because you're not going to be able to feel what you're getting. So for some people who are very active and want to get back to whatever job it is that they do, they might not ever do an actual hand piece because they're just become so functional with the hook. Here it goes. They can make any kind of terminal end device that the patient could ever need. Dan always tells a story about that there was a farmer. No, yeah, he was a farmer and he needed all of these different socket wrenches to be able to work on his farm machinery. So they made all the different, you know, all the 1/8, you know, whatever socket he needed to be. So they made all of those pieces of specialty equipment to be able to go into the end of the terminal device.
That is so cool.
That way he just interchanged just like he would, you know, interchanging with an actual wrench and things. But they just had to make them so they would fit on the end of his prosthetic device.
That is really cool.
So it's whatever the patient needs and however much they want to work at it. The other thing that I want you to think about when we were talking about the harness ones, when they're all the way up here, remember, what did I say that you have to, what muscles are you using to make this work?
Your steps.
Yeah,
Scap-
we're protracting and retracting. So everybody pretend like you're trying to screw in a light bulb up overhead. Can you protract and retract and do that at the same time? You can't. So anybody that would have to do any overhead work, this type of prosthetic would not work for them, because the only way to make this harness work is the protraction and retraction. You can't do that and work up overhead at the same time. So these become extremely personal to the patients. You know, you have to know, well, what do they need to be able to do? What do they still want to be able to do? And how can we get them there? You knowing all of the parts and pieces and what is available isn't as huge of a thing as knowing there's a specialist out there that's a prosthetist, and they have OT prosthetists that can help me figure it out. You just need to know, what do I got to do at my end? Once we get the prosthetic, what do we have to do with it? What do I have to do while I'm waiting? What types of, you know, do we have to do some desensitization things so they can get the prosthetic on? Do we have to manage the edema so it's workable? Are there accessory muscles like with this one that we've got to work on strengthening so they're able to do the prosthetic? You hooking it up and making all of the pieces work is not your specialty whatsoever, unless you love this so much and you want to go down that alley. Otherwise, your job is everything outside the actual prosthetic and helping them use it once they get it. And knowing even if and the company that my guy works for is Hanger, it is a nationwide company. So even if, you know, you're working in the outpatient clinic and somebody comes into you that they've had the prosthetic for 5 years and all of a sudden something's happened, you can call them and they can come and help figure out what's going on. So they don't just, you know, once the patient's functional, drop them off the face of the earth. Even if they're not the ones that fit the prosthetic in the original, you know, originally, they are really good about helping. You just give them a call, and if they don't know, they'll find out somebody who does. You know, just like Dan, he is he's not even a therapist by background. So he's more of the durable medical, all the medical equipment specialist. So if it becomes an actual like therapy sticking point, you're like, man, I just can't get them functional with this. They can hook you up with OTs, because your OT might not have a clue either. Because this is one of those hit and miss kind of things, whether you'll run into somebody or not. But it's one of those things that we have to give you the base information for, so you at least understand some basic concepts behind what will work and how it works and why it works and that kind of stuff. How's everybody doing? Everybody with me so far? Not with me so far? They can also make, which is really cool, and you'll see in the amputee, she customized her prosthetic. So you can see this does look cosmetically better than the hook would be at the end, right? You know, Tori, you wouldn't want a hook in your wedding pictures, right? You'd prefer to have a, you know, non-functional hand in the pictures versus the hook, probably, right? Just so cosmetically, you know, just like when we talked about having we wouldn't wear the splint, or even, you know, if you're going out to dinner with friends and you just want, you know, you just want to look a little normal. And some patients don't want the functional devices at the end. They'll just use their one hand, but want something for cosmetic purposes when they go out and about. That's okay too. The other amazing thing that they can do is they can make the hand look exactly like the other one, like including all the little wrinkles and like any little freckles that might be there. They can totally match skin tone. So it really would look like the other one. It's really awesome, the things that they can do now. The other big, so there is a difference between what I was just showing you and then Myoelectric. The Myoelectric have electronic pieces in them. So these are usually for more involved cases. Like the elbow socket that I was showing you before, it'll have electronic pieces in it. So if you've, I'm trying to think.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Would like, okay, so this, the myoelectrical prosthetics, is this similar to like what they use for those who have a spinal injury and like lost limb, like movement, but their brain is full functioning and wants that limb to move, but because of the injury, they can't move? Is that something similar, like how they stick the electrodes in the muscle and connect it to the brain?
You are on the right track. Just that is something, but not this specifically. Well, yes,
Okay.
yes, no, yes, you are right. Because what they'll do is, because what happened, you know, when we said, you know, if we did a short transhumeral and there's that force to the elbow, well, if you can't get the actual bicep strong enough to really make it move, they can implant electrical devices in there to help make the contraction happen. And it will send electrical impulses to the prosthetic. So where you usually might have seen these, you know, if you're thinking, you know, it'll be any movie, they're going to have the fancy smancy, it looks great. You know, things can spin in circles, electronic devices, and they make it look easy. But can you imagine how expensive these are? These are outrageously expensive. This will not be the first thing that insurance companies will pay for. They're going to pay for the harness type one first before something that's myoelectric. And it's not because they're trying, in this case, it's not because they're trying to be stingy necessarily. Why do you think it might be? Why would I want to start somebody out with the other more simplistic, rough around the edges kind of prosthetic and then maybe work to the fancy smancy one?
Because you've already got low compliance with them from the get-go. You don't know whether they're going to want to keep using it right off the bat. So why start off with something that's ungodly expensive?
Yes. I always, we laugh because this was the thing that drove that point home for me. He goes, it's like giving a 16-year-old the keys to, you know, a Ferrari right away. You're not going to do that because you don't know that you can trust them yet. How safe are they going to be? You're going to give them, you know, maybe just something that's old, reliable, you know, we'll get them from point A to point B to make sure they're safe and compliant first. And then you can move them into a better car. It's the same thing here. You got to make sure they're going to be compliant and willing to use things first. Once they are, then insurance companies are, I wouldn't say they're more than happy to do it, but they're more apt to do that because you've been able to show compliance. And here's where they're still having trouble. You know, we've really been working hard. They're compliant with doing everything, but because of this part of their job or this activity that they want to be able to do, we need something a little different. but you're gonna have to prove that they're compliant with it. Right now, I think or it shouldn't even be necessarily right now, but where do you think who usually gets first the big cool technology? What population do you think, because their job makes them prone to a lot of amputations, they kind of become
military.
the guinea pigs?
The military.
The military. As sad as it is, whenever there's a war, more technology for prosthetics develops. You know, it's one of the kind of positive sides to it, just like, you know, hey, one of the positive sides to COVID is we've learned that we can do online lectures. It's kind of great. It's super foggy out. Great. We'll just do it online. We don't have to drive and leave extra early. You know, it's, you know, we didn't like it in the beginning and we still might not like it now, but there are some positive things that come out of it. Obviously, nobody wants to go to war, but that's usually when things start trickling down. You know, they try all these things with the military and then they're like, hey, we got this working. Now we can send it out to the general population. So that is usually whenever, you know, that you'll see that they have if you work at the VA, that's when you'll usually be working with a lot of prosthetics and, you know, the amputees and all of that kind of stuff. And there are, you know, OTAs that work at the VA. So if that's, you know, something that interests you, that could be one life path that you might want to follow. So if this, you know, it's one of those very intriguing kind of a thing. This is advantages and disadvantages to the myoelectric. So things back, it looks better. You know, you've got increased grip. You know, it doesn't take as much to, you know, it doesn't take as much of your own body power to make it work. It kind of works similar to what it would have normally, you know, just with, you know, the brain thinking it, the hand opens versus, you know, the regular devices. You've got to put a lot of work into making them work. It's not just going to open and close magically. You know, you've got to be able to work on what part of the forearm, you know, sometimes it's pronators or, you know, you have pronators or supinators that you're retraining into wrist flexion extenders. You know, so you end up retraining them to do something else. The myoelectric, it's not as complicated. You still make them do different things. The muscles do different things, but they don't have to work quite as hard. Problem is the cost. And think anything that's got more electrical parts, there's more maintenance to it. And it's also heavier, you know, so it's not gonna be as light as their arm was, or how even a typical prosthetic would have been. Because of all of the electrical components, it is a lot heavier. So it does take time to get used to it a little bit. Let's see. Was there anything in like the post-op stuff that didn't make sense, or that you were like, didn't realize that we would end up doing that? You know, that would be part of our job, technically. I always think the one thing in with skin inspection, it's kind of something that you might not think about, but then it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You're going to have to teach them to use a mirror to inspect their skin, because they're not going to be able to see the end of that residual limb necessarily. or be able to see all sides of it, or they need the mirror to see it because they're not going to feel it as well either. Is it an emergency? Do you want to come and brag to them about that? Sorry, the teenager's interrupting, since we're remote today.
And I Googled all of it.
And you
All of us Googled all of it. Abby got an F on it.
obviously Google's wrong. This is what happens when you cheat, everybody, and use Google. You get a D on the
The
quiz.
D plus.
A D plus on the quiz. Google does
I
not
only
know
Googled like
everything.
4.
Google does not know everything. Serves them right, right? This is what happens when you don't study and you just use Google. Life with a teenager, right? Yes, she knew I was doing this and I ignored her the first 3 times she came around. So I thought this time, okay, fine. Okay. But just because they won't be able to feel if there's any skin irritation necessarily, or feel as well. So you have to be able to teach, okay, hold a mirror around to the area so you're able to see it really well. Because they might not be able to feel real well that it's, when they clean it, is it really dry? So it's almost over exaggerating some things because the sensation just isn't going to be there. Some of it might come back, some of it might not. They might always be a little hypersensitive, or they might not have any sensation whatsoever in that area. It just kind of depends how things grow back and how damaged things were before they had to do the amputation. This is just more about the wrapping. Once they do get the prosthetic, you got to make them realize they can't wear it every day, all day at once. You got to slowly work up to it. Number one, if you wear it all day that first day, you're going to be exhausted and you're probably going to have a lot of irritation because your residual limb is not used to having the prosthetic on there. And so you've got to just slowly work up to it. They're probably going to be super excited. Yay, I have this. I'm going to just jump right in and start using it. And then they come into you the next day extremely frustrated. It won't do what we're supposed to do. I should be able to walk now. I should be able to. No, it doesn't work that. It's not that easy. You slowly work up to things. And that's why some people become non-compliant, because it's so much work. It was almost easier just to do things without it. Because think, in the meantime of waiting for things to heal and for the prosthetic to, get made and that kind of thing, they still have to be able to get dressed and do their daily things. So we're teaching them adaptive techniques so they get really good at those. So then sometimes they are just comfortable to continue to do it that way. And that is their prerogative to do. That's why we start with the lower end costing prosthetics. Let's see. This should all make sense. Everything we've already talked about, all the post-op stuff. Did any of these links work? Did anybody try them? Because I keep trying to get them to work, like I re-embed them, but they don't always. Did anybody try the links in the PowerPoint to see if they were nice enough to work?
If I remember, I couldn't get a couple of them to work, if I remember correctly. It was
It
either
always
for this
drives me
class
crazy because
or
it's never the same
1060.
ones. Which drives me mad. Ooh, I think this one's gonna work. Ugh. Okay. Hopefully you can see if my computer will cooperate. See what I mean? I'm telling you. There we go. Yeah, there's a little weight at the end that'll help. Amputees use their teeth a lot when they probably shouldn't. I don't know if you could, how good the sound was, if you could hear the like little robotic sound. This one is one of those that's a hybrid. The bottom half is myoelectric and the top half isn't. So just depending on what they need, they can make any combinations there in, you know, whatever they need. And that he would just then repeat this process to get the other one on, because he happened to need two. And that was, it took him 2.5 minutes and probably months and months and months and months of practice. It would take a lot of practice just to be able to put that first sleeve on. And then to be able to, you know, get the prosthetic on. And just like being able to get your arm in the harness the correct way. Because you might end up putting your arm in and it's all twisted and backwards. And so you can see it can be very easily frustrating to somebody. So it's a matter of how bad do they want it and what can we do to make, you know, things a little easier so you will use it more. I was glad that one worked because that's always a good one to see how hard things are. Thinking, is there anything else we haven't talked about really? What do you think? Is there anything else I haven't talked about that as you were like doing the homework or you're like, okay, how well do we really need to know that for the test? How much is just a good bits of info, or is this a good information?
How well do we need to know the difference between passive and active TDs?
Just knowing what the difference, just the basic difference. So what is the basic difference?
Passive moves, or no, passive stays still, and active moves. And
Yeah.
that there's two different types of active.
Yeah, and that's just just knowing the two basic differences, the passive and the active. The passive is more of that, it doesn't move. Think of that cosmetic looking hand. There's no function to it. Versus the active one has moving parts and it's going to be functional. So not any more detail than that. But if you just think about passive and active, what it means, that should help you.
For the like long and short transhumeral and long and short transradial and the transfemoral and transtibial, like one of the things you said in the pre-recorded lecture is like we could have a question on the exam if a short transhumeral amputation happens, like what would be left? Are you wanting like the landmark type of a thing that would be left, or are you wanting like the functions that would be left?
The functions that would be left. Where in the heck is that slide there? No.
And would it only
Oh,
be
yeah.
between like the upper extremity, or would the lower extremity be in it too?
I'm just worried about upper extremity. So slide 11 and 12. Like 11 just gives you the terminology. So it's nice to know, And then 12 is the one that you need to know, because you don't need necessarily the landmarks. It's what arm functions are maintained and what's lost.
Thank you.
On the post-op acute care, can you explain, it's the wearing schedule, can you explain the rubber bands and pinch force and that?
You know which slide
It's
you're on.
slide 28.
Oh, that worked. When let me show you on a hook. A picture of the hook. Okay, what you can do on the ends of these hooks is add rubber bands, and that'll add pressure, or like how much pressure it can withstand.
Okay.
Like the more the rubber band, it's
So like a resistance band?
yes, it's a resistance. Yes, so they can work on going against resistance, opening and closing the hook against resistance. So that's kind of one of those, like, think of it as an exercise you would do with somebody to prep them to be able to use it for function. We got to get, can they open and close the rubber band? And then doing different resistances of them will work being able to use the hook. Good question. Everybody's kind of flipping through.
Phantom limb and phantom sensation.
Yes. You need to know that. And I didn't go over it in huge detail right here, right now, because that is definitely one of the videos I'm giving you from the amputee OT. She talks about it. Like she has a whole little video that's all that it's about. And I think
Just like-
hearing it from somebody who actually feels it and that stuff, it makes more sense.
As in, so we just need to know the difference between them, basics, in depth, what?
Just basics. All of this is just basics. she's gonna explain it, but I want to say, who thinks they know now? Why is that a problem? The limb pain and the phantom sensations. It's not there anymore. So why do they think it's there?
Because of the overriding of nerve receptions, right?
Yes, the brain still wants to send all of its information down there. It doesn't know that something was cut off. So when somebody says they can feel, like she even talks about like her big toe will itch. And you're like, your big toe's not even there. How's that? But the brain doesn't know that it's not there anymore. So it still continually sends all of these nerve receptors down that way.
Okay, I have a
And yeah, go ahead.
So is phantom sensation when you feel as if you feel sensation coming from a body part that is not there, and phantom limb is like your brain thinking that it's there? Does that make sense? Like, is sensation coming from the limb, and then phantom limb is the brain going to the limb, not recognizing it's there?
Well, they're both kind of, one is like phantom limb sensation, so they feel something that's not there, but other people have pain. So they have phantom limb pain, like the whole leg will hurt, like it's painful. Think of it
Mhm.
also as it's so oversensitive, it's painful.
Okay.
So,
So
really-
they're very similar, just one is sensation of numbness and stuff like that, and the other one is just painful.
Yeah, like they might feel sensation wise that I feel that the rest of my leg is there or my whole arm is there. You know,
So
you
some of
look
it-
at it and you know it's not, but you feel like everything is still there.
And is
Versus the
part of it-
pain is when you're getting like like it hurts or there's, you know, I even think of it as like when she describes that, you know, there's a specific toe that itches, like that's a very specific type of pain and sensation versus just thinking the limb is there versus there's actual pain and more sensation with it.
So part of
yes,
it
they're
is
very similar.
psychological.
They're very similar. Yeah, and it's retraining the brain to know that it's not there. And it takes a while. I mean, it takes a while to train the brain to do anything. So imagine how long it takes to untrain it. The most important thing about that is to make sure that they know they're not crazy. Because they're not going to want to admit to having these feelings and sensations because people are going to think people are going to think they're crazy. Because how can you have pain and, you know, feeling and sensation and think it's there when you look down and you see that it's not there? So they don't want people to think they're crazy, so they just don't say anything. But there are medications and other treatments that we can do to help limit it. But we can't help if we don't know that it's a problem. So just, you know, in advance, kind of telling them, you know, it's okay. It's going to be common that you will, you know, feel like the limb is still there, even though it's not. Because once they know that it's a common thing and that they're not crazy, they're more likely to tell you about it so that you can help them with it. Anything else? My goal was to be done early anyway, so I can finish getting all those videos. And then it was less that the other people missed too. But if you've got questions, now is the time because then it's recorded and everybody else can hear it. Really? Everybody's good? All right. Otherwise, I think I only have a few people signed up for tomorrow for study session. So please, if you're able to come, are you coming tomorrow, John? Good. I was gonna message you, but yes. Because those who were there yesterday, was it helpful? Are you feeling better?
It was very helpful.
Okay,
I agree.
good, okay. Those people who were there yesterday and are coming tomorrow, if you can help me, if it's any new faces, like, you know, Tori, I think you're coming tomorrow, John's tomorrow, who wasn't there yesterday, so if we, you know, miss something, or, you know, if you remember, oh yeah, this is how we figured it out, you know, we'll kind of all work together. Otherwise, make sure your case study is got all the detail in it by Sunday, so we're ready to practice it Monday. Please be ready to go at 9 o'clock. Contessa is typically very prompt and like wants to get going and moving, so she'll do a little presentation, and then we'll be making 3 splints, and then we'll practice our activities and be ready for the following week. And yes, I know next week's stuff isn't up yet. That is on my to-do list for today too. I think it's Burns next week. Does that sound right? Anybody? I'd have to look at the syllabus. I'll just probably be posting the rest of the semester all up at once, so. So you've got Burns, adaptive equipment, rehab approach, all that good stuff to do yet, so.
Will that be posted by tonight?
Um,
At least next week's?
yes, good likelihood,
Okay.
yes.
Cause I have, like, normally I do my stuff Thursday, Friday. So I'm hoping that if it could be
Yes.
posted tonight, then I can print a good portion of it.
Yes, it should
Next
be.
week on the syllabus, it just says like course review and discharge planning and
Oh,
finalizing.
see, I'm
bio-
a week ahead of myself. Yes. I'm a week ahead of myself. Yes, because it's kind of like our final review before the lab practical stuff. And then I think the following Wednesday would then be the rehab approach stuff. Because we're moving on. So yeah, so we'll try to do, so we got to talk discharge planning about your case studies. And then maybe review some of those little things that we haven't done yet as far as biomechanical, like go back and maybe review a little posture gait, any of the superficial deep modalities. So anything that we haven't been doing in case or study sessions, because right now we've been focusing on what's going to be on the lab practical, those things. But there's still been other little things that we've sprinkled in along the way that I want to make sure everybody's still staying on top of. So next week is kind of like our cutoff for biomechanical. And then we're going to switch to the rehab frame of reference. Thanks, Deanna. I was just going to skip that week and off we go. So really, Tori, you're good. There really won't be anything because we're just going to talk about discharge planning, and it might just be easier for me to put you in your case study groups and do breakout rooms, and you do your discharge planning right there. Hopefully I can find. Oh, are you trying to hello again today? He knows I'm talking to everybody again, so he wanted to say hello, just like your cats all wander through. But I will hear while Zoom and everything is rendering and I'm getting all of this uploaded, I'll finish finding the last couple videos that I want you to watch. And then I'll just post that in the module, and I'll just put an announcement that they're up there so you can watch them. Because like I said, I think it's just more valuable to hear it from somebody who's gone through it than me, who only you know, knows a little bit that I know. Okay, sound good?
Also,
Yes.
sorry, last
Good.
question, just for clarification, for our case studies, our individual steps, like our individual activity, we are using our deficit, like our goals and deficits,
Yes, you are
correct? Not the
using
groups.
your, yes, when you do your individual activity, you are doing your 4 goals, even though
And
one
you
of
want
them
us-
is used already in the big activity, doesn't matter. You're using
you want us-
your 4 goals.
Okay, and you want us to like put what we like, just briefly say like we're gonna use eccentric and concentric.
Yes,
And
you'll
then-
write
yeah,
step,
okay.
whatever step 1 is to your activity. And then, you know, if it's gather supplies and you're gonna work on right shoulder strength or right shoulder flexion strength with eccentric and concentric. And then that's it. That's all you have to write. Then you go to step 2. What are you addressing? What strategy are you going to use? If it's
For
sensation or coordination, you don't have to be specific. You can just put coordination or sensation, because you have to do all of those things when you're doing either sensation or coordination. You can't pick one, but you can pick something for range of motion, strength, and edema. So just indicate what strategy you picked to use if there's a strategy to pick. And then that's all the detail you need to do for your individual. So it shouldn't take you very long at all to do it. Does that help with that? Okay. Because that's all, I would have all of that done Sunday. Because then what's going to happen Monday? Any feedback I give you and anything that we adjust while you're practicing it with me, you have a week to make those changes. So then a week from Sunday is when it's totally due. There's no change in it. Nothing else is happening to it. And I'm going to grade it from there. Your grade relies on, have you taken my feedback? Did you, and is everything done on time? That's pretty much your grade. That, and you'll have to do a peer feedback. You know, did you, and I told the group yesterday, the best way to do that feedback form is go back to your team assignment that you did at the beginning. And all those in the rules that you made. Did each specific person follow the rules? If they did, then you'll give them, you know, a good score. If there was a goal or a rule that they didn't follow very well, then you'd say, you know, they did really well on most things, but they had trouble with, you know, the deadline rule or whatever it was that you made. That helps you make it very, very objective. And I think it's easier to do feedback like that, to be objective about it, than try to figure out, well, how do I say this? You know, this is what happened, but I don't want to tell her, you know, you don't want to give me this long narrative story. But if it basically was, you know, the second rule about deadlines is not what was met, then just say didn't meet the deadline rule. And it just helps you give it a little bit more effectively. So that does get taken into consideration with your grade too. So yes, it's a group project, but it's an individual grade. So you might get a totally different score than somebody else in your group. Because like I showed everybody yesterday, or no, I didn't show everybody, I just showed the one group. I can go back and see all the history, all the versions, and I can see how much how much work everybody did. Because it tells me who was editing what. It's a really nice feature.
So my question along that line of the editing is that, like, what if we were doing a Zoom meeting and we were all just working on one portion and someone was typing?
That is the only glitch. And that's why I read the feedback forms, because if you tell me in, you
Okay.
know, because you're gonna grade each person. And if you're telling me, Tori, in there that everybody equally participated, you know, we did Zoom meet, you know, that I'm, okay, that totally explains why it might only look like one person's been in there doing a whole lot. So
Gotcha.
I use all of it.
Okay.
to
I was
kinda
like, because
come
I
up-
was like, well, I'm like, there were a couple of times, like a couple of our Zoom meetings where only a couple of us were typing, but we were all talking about it. So I was like,
yes,
I don't know
yeah,
how
so
she's
I
gonna
know,
look at
I
that.
totally know that kind of thing happens, so that's why I go back to then your peer feedbacks. Well, and I assume you're being honest. Okay, so if it wasn't equal participation, but you told me it was, there's not a whole lot I can do, because you told me it was equal participation. So then I'm gonna assume it was like what Tori's instance was, that, you know, you guys were all meeting, but one person was typing it in. So that's why it looked like only one person was doing it. So you have to be honest. Okay, that's why I think you going back to the rules helps you be objective about it. And even think, okay, if one time were they late, was it a constant or was it just that one time? Because, you know, we all have those times where, you know, heck, technology is being weird, and, you know, one time we were late getting something in or late to a meeting, but otherwise overall they were on time. Well, we all might have, you know, one thing that might come up, but if it was like consistently, then that's something you're going to need, you know, to be honest about. Okay. Is that it? All right, then I will let you go. You guys got a nice little break. I will work on getting the rest of those videos put together. I just have a couple more I need to find, so hopefully it won't take me too long. And then you just need to go back and watch them, and you're gonna do this week for prosthetics what you did for splinting. So even while you're watching the few that I send you, you know how YouTube will give you suggested things to watch? You might just go over, pull another video, watch it, and if it looks really interesting, that's, you know, what you do for the discussion board for it. So you need to have something in for the discussion board by the end of the week, by Sunday. That way everybody then can take next week to look through everybody's and kind of find out what cool new thing everybody found.
Okay, so you're going to post several videos about prosthetics and amputation.
Yes.
We go through them, we choose one that's interesting, we tell why.
Well, you're gonna go find another one. Like, these are just the kind of get you started. And they're very like, the one is, she's talking about phantom limb pain. The one is talking about what led to the amputation and why she picked that particular amputation. There is another one about because that's a lower extremity. There's another one that's about an upper extremity. So I'm just giving you a few to like get you started. Then I want you to find another one that is kind of like, man, that was cool. You know, like, I really hope I can find the one video where it is a myoelectric and she can push a button and her whole handles do a 360. It's just kind of cool to watch because, you know, your hand doesn't normally do that, but you can watch the prosthetic do a whole 360. It's just kind of cool. But once you watch a couple of these, you know, all of YouTube will give you suggested videos to go watch. So, and it doesn't have to be Like, I know there's some that are like lectures on them and, you know, it's like an hour presentation. It doesn't have to be that. It could be you found a patient telling their story and, you know, you found the story really interesting and you saw the prosthetic, you know, and saw how, you know, because there's videos on how the prosthetics made. There's the ones with different types of end terminal devices like we talked about. You might find one that shows all of the different pieces. So it's just to get you to find something else, you know, share what you found with the group so we can kind of teach each other. And then you're just kind of like, and then after everybody's posted, then you're going to go back and read everybody's to see what everybody found. And kind of summarize, you know, oh, that was really cool. You know, I liked what Maddie
Is
found. I
there-
didn't find that one. I really liked the video that Maddie described, you know.
Is there going to be a new discussion board for this, or are we putting this under the splints discussion
Nope,
board
there should
still?
be. There should be a prosthetic discussion.
I do not see it under, when I go under discussions of the course, there's only the splint one.
I wonder why that one's not showing up as a discussion.
And are we supposed to be commenting on all of these splint ones?
You don't, no, you're not commenting on all of the splint ones. You're just reading through them and then going back and why would I have that? It says due by the 14th, but we changed that, didn't we?
The splint?
The
I don't know.
splint assignment, okay, yeah, the splint assignment from the discussion board, yeah, that's due this Sunday. So
Confused.
I think you're just kind of talking about some, yeah. Once you've read through all of them, write a paragraph about your favorite thing that you found about what somebody else wrote. So it can't be, I really like Maddie's idea. Okay, that doesn't do anything. It's got to be a paragraph. You know, a paragraph is at least 3 sentences. But I don't want a novel. This is just this assignment is a way to make sure you went back and looked at what everybody else came up with.
Mhm.
Because that's so there should be, and once you said that, I saw that it wasn't published, so I'm going to hit the publish for those now. So I'm like, I knew I saw them. Which I have to fix the dates now that I published them, which is probably why I didn't publish them. So I will fix the dates. So the discussion board part will be due Sunday, which would be the 21st, the same day as the splint assignment discussion board is. So you could even go do it right now. You know, while you're waiting in between classes, go find a cool video. And then the following Sunday, you're doing the same thing like you did with the splints. You have to go back through, see what everybody did, and then write a little paragraph about what you learned and what you found interesting. Okay. I'm going to fix the dates right now. Thanks, Tori, because I would have thought that they were all published and ready to go. Sometimes that happens. I put it in there and then I just don't publish that part, and I think I see it's there, and you guys think I'm crazy because I say it's there. Okay, so are we, everybody good? Now we should be good, hopefully. All right, I will see whoever tomorrow. Otherwise, I'll see you Monday. Sound good?